So, Daphne, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Daphne Glorian, and I started that vineyard 30 years ago, sort of on a whim, and it was in a very, very remote part of Spain, the Priorat, that nobody had ever heard of it, which is why actually it was interesting.
Yeah.
And I decided to take the name Clos Erasmus because my father was a sort of self-appointed specialist of Erasmus from Rotterdam, and his most famous essay was In Praise of Folly. And when I started that project, my parents were so incensed that kept telling me I was crazy. So that was it. The name came naturally.
That was the genesis.
Yeah.
I mean, whose parents don't discuss Erasmus at the dinner table? Am I wrong?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually thought he was an old uncle who had passed away not too long ago until
Really?
one day I realized that I was off by about 6 centuries.
It's an old uncle.
Yeah, a really old one. Yeah. Old
Where
relative.
did you grow up?
Between France and Switzerland.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Great.
yeah, Spain was a totally new adventure. I had never been to Spain until I went there, and in one afternoon I bought the first little piece of vineyard.
Really? That was your first trip to Spain?
First trip to
I
Spain.
never knew that.
Yeah.
I knew that.
Yeah.
And so my understanding, you were not alone in that project.
No, it was a sort of communal effort. We were 5 of us originally, and we sort of all chipped in to build the winery because nobody had enough money to do it by themselves. And we also thought it was going to be fun to make wine with friends, and it was an exciting project. And we went from there, and it really went further and faster than we ever expected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, an amazing job that you've done over the years. I know that the Priorat region has really captured kind of my heart, and it's such an amazing part of the world. Talk a little bit about the Priorat region itself. What makes it unique? What makes it special?
So it is geographically remote. Even though it's only 30 miles from the Mediterranean, it's it's a microcosm, and it is like an amphitheater, and it was volcanic. So the soil is pure slate. And it's really 98% of the soil in the Priorat is slate. And all around it, you have granite, you have chalk, you have different things. But that is really the character of the region and of the wines.
Yeah.
Because you find that minerality, that very strong backbone given by the slate to the wines.
And so you have this great decomposed, sort of slatey soil, and sometimes not decomposed.
Some of it is not decomposed. No, when we plant, we barely have 3 inches at best of organic soil, and after that it's the rock, and the roots have to break that slate to go look for water.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And in very steep hillside.
Very steep, very
well.
steep. Yeah. Everything has to be done by hand. No machine harvesting.
Wow. So in those early days, when you first started, what was the first year you started?
So the first year was 89,
but
it was a sort of, I know that sounds silly, but a sort of rye. Dry runs, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to have a practice year. Right?
Yes. And then, so 90 was really the very first vintage for me.
90 was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's come a long way. So what did you plant? Were there grapes growing?
Yeah,
were there vines growing?
The very first little plot of vineyards I bought had some Grenache and some Syrah on it.
I see.
Yeah.
And then you plant, what did you plant first?
And then from there I kept planting Grenache. Then I acquired another small piece that had Cabernet Sauvignon, which is now gone.
You've replanted the Cabernet Sauvignon?
Yeah. Cabernet Sauvignon is not the right variety for the Priorat.
For the region?
No, it's way too dry, too arid, so the poor thing is suffering too much. So, and I love Grenache.
Yeah.
I am replanting more and more with Grenache.
Well, that's great news to me. I love Grenache also. And I think, for me, my love of Grenache came from well, a number of great wines, but also I think the passion of Sam
Yes.
Beall, who sort of, he introduced me to a lot in the world of wine.
Yeah.
He introduced me, to his passion for Grenache, and we used to sort of fight a little, not fight, that's not the right word, but we had discussions about what's better,
Yeah.
Pinot Noir or Grenache. And they have similarities and they have differences, and he was in the Grenache camp and I was in the Pinot camp for a long time, which might surprise a lot of people who know me today and didn't know me 10 years ago, because Grenache today is really the grape that I push and talk about and sort of appreciate the most. And I'm interested because Sam introduced me to Clos Erasmus. And in my mind, I think the 2001 vintage particularly was the vintage that I remember tasting with him. And I wonder if you know where he first came into contact with Clos Erasmus, to your knowledge.
With us here at Blackberry. Yeah.
So with you and Eric.
As far as I remember, definitely, yeah. We brought it, and there might have been a winemaker dinner.
Sure.
Where that featured Clos Erasmus, and that was it.
Just captured by it.
Yeah.
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 It's. I mean, I remember him talking about it in terms of, this is an amazing wine that you should never sell. And I hate to say that to you because obviously it's your livelihood.
I need to.
Yeah, well, but it's so rare. There's such little production, of the wine that I think he was always really, careful not to sell too much of it. He wanted to put it in the cellar and to age it like we do with some of our great wines. What is total production?
Clos Erasmus is 3,000 bottles.
3,000 bottles.
Yeah.
That's roughly 12 barrels.
Yes. Yeah.
12 barrels.
12 barrels
of wine.
Yeah.
That's amazingly small.
It is.
So do you have, how much vineyard land do you have in the Priorat?
Well, I have, at this point, I have 35 acres.
35 acres?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I have to think because we have been planting quite a bit in the last few years, so it keeps changing.
Really? Yeah.
But not all of it by any means goes to Clos Erasmus. Clos Erasmus is still comes from the same parcels year after year.
Really?
Yeah, and they have their microclimate and their specific soil, and it's Clos Erasmus. I know each harvest, give or take 5%, I know exactly which grapes will go where in each wine.
Like bunch per bunch,
yeah,
almost.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
So what does set it apart? I mean, how do you know that?
It is hard to explain. It's something, those parcels, I keep learning from them, clearly.
Right.
A winemaker never stops learning from the parcels and the vines, and every year something different happens. But there is something in the grapes coming from those little pieces that really makes them different. I mean, it's really more brilliant. It stands out.
It's interesting. I mean, it's more of a feeling. Almost,
yes. Yeah.
That you have for those.
Yeah.
For those grapes or those bunches.
Yeah.
But every year, it's from the same sort of vineyard parcels,
Yes.
and that hasn't changed. Or?
No, barely. No. Sometimes something would, from a different vineyard, all of a sudden there would be a small part that would be so good that I might use it for Erasmus, but it's really, it almost never varies.
Gotcha.
It's, yeah.
That's amazing. So, an idea came across to sort of make a special cuvee for Sam, and I think there are a number of reasons, for that. I think one is that I don't know how many people know this, but Sam's middle name is Erasmus.
Yes.
And I always thought that was an interesting connection. I think we all thought that was an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Is, one whose parents sit around the table talking about Erasmus, but whose middle name is Erasmus as well. And I think the answer is these two, So I remember Eric, called me and we were talking, and he said, "Well, we have to make, we have to do something.
Yeah.
We have to do something." What was the conversation that you and Eric had?
Oh, it was such an obvious, natural thing to do. I mean, there was never any question. I was, we need to make a wine for Sam.
Yeah, that was sort of the way I felt too. It wasn't even with a purpose behind it. It was we had to do something.
Exactly, absolutely. He loved Grenache. There was his name. That it was absolutely natural.
Yeah.
It was. I don't think we even discussed it. I mean, it was okay.
It was an of course, kind of a thing. And I sort of felt that way as we, we talked about it, and you had the 16 vintage that we want to use, the 2016 vintage, and you had it, I think, already essentially made and in barrels when we got together in 2018 to taste.
Yes,
the wine.
exactly. Yeah, when it was time to bottle the wine.
Yeah.
And just checking the barrels and see which ones we liked best.
Yeah. Which was amazing. I mean, I thought, at first when Eric, and you talked to me, and I thought it's a really wonderful idea and gesture, and that's what I thought it was, at first. And I should have known with the two of you involved that it was something that we would follow through with. And 2 years later, after that conversation, we talked about it and we said, now's the time. So I think it was May of 2016.
It was the spring, exactly, spring of actually when we got 2018. Yeah,
2018. Yeah. And I got to go to Spain and visit your winery, which is an amazing treat. Beautiful sort of purple interior and amazing, amazing place. Your winery is an old theater or former theater, or
the winery was the theater of the village.
Wow.
It was, so you cannot, not much of it is left except for the walls, but it was the main building in the village where people on Saturday night there was a stage and they would have those little theater companies going from village to village.
Yeah.
Or they would have their little dances. And
amazing.
It was, it was the club.
That was where people went.
Yeah.
And the village is Gratayops?
Gratayops. Yeah. 200 people.
And then that's that's typical for the Priorat, a small.
It is fairly, it is fairly typical. The largest village in the Priorat is 500 people.
Oh wow, a city.
Yeah, exactly.
A
and a couple of them are only 60 people. So
really, that's amazing. I think it's not very far from Barcelona, and as you said, the Mediterranean, and it is so far removed.
Absolutely.
It seems like in time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we visited the winery. I remember we pulled some samples at the winery. You have some amphora there. We pulled some from amphora and such. And then we went back to your home, your and Eric's house in Gratayops.
Yeah.
And it was there that you have really the barrels.
The barrels of
Erasmus
in a vaulted cellar downstairs. Right. Yeah.
Which was an amazing treat to get to. I mean, go and taste and I kind of wonder like. What were you thinking when we were going through that? Because I know in my head I was looking for a particular style of Erasmus. Like, I was thinking a lot of that 01 vintage in my head of how that tasted and the sort of the intensity of that, and that's sort of what I was looking for. I think when we were tasting through barrels, but I wonder. I mean, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, I mean, with only 12 barrels to put together anyways, it could have a very big effect on the other Clos Erasmus.
On the rest, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've never done this before. You never made
a
different Erasmus.
No, it was the first and only time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of gives me shivers to hear you say that. But I mean, so were you concerned? That,
no, absolutely not. I mean, from the minute the decision was made, that was the way it was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the other importers didn't get as much wine that year, but
right, yeah.
That
is what it is.
Exactly.
It is. Well, it's it was a treat to get to sort of blend them together. And so when we did the blending, we were upstairs in your dining room, and I remember we had all these little samples that we had pulled, labeled and numbered, and the barrel samples, and we tasted through, and I think we came up with 3 possible cuvées.
Yeah.
And perhaps whittled that down to 2.
Yeah.
You know, I remember thinking the whole time we were blending is I have no idea what I'm doing. Because, you know, I taste a lot of wine after someone who's really talented like you makes it. You know, and your personality is behind it, and your thought process is behind it. And I taste it, and then I taste it even with more and more age. I have very little experience putting together what I would consider kind of the raw product and how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
How does wine change from...
Blending is a very interesting process because you can, with 5% of a different wine in the blend, can change it tremendously.
Yeah.
Or not at all.
And does it amplify? Some do, some don't?
Some do, some don't. It's the reaction of the different elements together is, I would not say completely unpredictable, but there are surprises.
Right.
I mean, it can amplify something or I completely mute it.
So interesting.
It is really fascinating.
Yeah, because I know I had an idea in my head of, again, sort of stylistically what I hoped the wine could become, and I don't think there'd be any wrong answer with any of the, you know, what was available when we were tasting. But I remember thinking like a little bit of Syrah changes it a lot, kind of a thing, or a little bit of Carignan can change it a lot, you know, and that kind of a thing, or some oak versus amphora versus. And so I remember we whittled it down to a few cuvées, and then I spent some time in Spain with you and Eric and a few others, tasting some other great wines, and went home, and then a few months later, you got some samples, you know, to me, and then we had that same sort of A, B, or C, and that was a really hard decision to make, in my opinion, as far as, well, I mean, it's like a final decision, you know, sort of a thing. And they were all really amazing, and I just remember sort of thinking how I really didn't know what I was doing. I think how I was like, well, none of these are going to be bad, but there was one that appealed to me more than the others, and that was one that was just all Grenache, all Grenache.
Yes. And this is what I was hoping.
It was, okay, good. So we were on the same page. We never really connected sort of after that. It was this is the one, and it goes into production. And then beyond that, then we had to decide on a label.
Yes.
Which to me was always almost the easiest part of it, because I asked our team early on, you know, the Clos Erasmus label is such a remarkable label, and I don't think it's changed. Maybe the color has changed a little. No, maybe
the quality of the paper.
The paper is
pretty much. The rest, it has been pretty much the same from day one.
Yeah, which has Erasmus's
his profile. Yes.
And Sam had such a distinct profile.
Exactly.
I think anyone that knew Sam, really knew. His head, you know, with his
absolutely,
kind of, you know, curly hair and his profile, and of course, and when I asked, I said, "Do we have a profile of him?" We did. We had a silhouette. So we were able to, you know, take his profile and replace Erasmus's on that one cuvee, and add his name into it. So it's a remarkable label, and if you didn't
it came together beautifully.
I wanted to take a chance to taste the wine with you, if that's okay. And,
absolutely.
And see what you think about it. I haven't tasted it since we chose that wine, so I think, if you don't mind, we'll taste it.
Absolutely, because I have not tasted it in quite a while.
And so we made how much wine?
450 bottles.
450 bottles of wine. So there's one. It was under 2 barrels, 1 3/4 barrels?
It's a barrel and a half.
Barrel and a half.
1 full barrel of a very specific vineyard. that we can talk about it
Talk
when
about
we
that.
test the wine. Yeah.
It's
And then 2/3 came from that one barrel, and
this is a moment.
with a third.
Yeah.
Tight cork. Yeah.
Tight cork, but also you use these great long corks as well.
Yeah.
Which I really.
Well, you know, the wine is supposed to age.
Yeah. And we have a great collection of Erasmus in the cellar. I'm excited about that. If you don't mind. We have it kind of cool. I know you like.
Yes, absolutely.
You like Erasmus
yeah.
served cool. Oh wow. It's not too cool, is it?
It's maybe a tad cool,
Yeah.
but even so, you can already.
Can warm.
Yeah. You can
And so now
feel the. It's a texture that you can
already.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it took just a second, to sort of come out of there, but I mean it unfairly I sort of, when I think of Priorat, I think of Clos Erasmus. So it really was my introduction to Priorat, and I hold everything else sort of against that. But every time I smell this sort of underlying black cherry, like sort of candied black cherry that is under the surface of that minerality.
Yeah.
That's what I always think of with Clos Erasmus.
Yeah.
So you mentioned texture when you smell this.
Yeah. To me, it is almost tactile. I mean, it is something that I almost feel in my fingers.
Interesting. Well, you know it so well from a touch standpoint. I'm gonna taste it. I hope.
Yep. Yeah. So, what I really was looking, my concept, and I think we were pretty much on the same page. Was I wanted a Grenache that had that sort of intensity, that high pitch, very pure, that really like a high note of Grenache, and that is from that barrel. It's a north-facing vineyard. It's on the other side of the river in Gradajops. It has a completely different character from the rest of the vineyards.
And what is the name of this?
Escales.
Escales.
Yeah. And so I knew very early on. I mean, even before the wine was ready to be tasted. I mean, I knew that most likely Escales will play a big part in that wine.
And that was, I remember when we were tasting through all, and that was like the barrel all the way in the far left, if I recall. Is it,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And, I remember tasting that one. I don't know if we were freely tasting or if you were sort of leading, the tasting or what have you. I think it was just free tasting, but that one really stopped me in my tracks.
From all the barrels.
I do remember almost asking your permission if we could use all of that barrel, because it was such an astounding tasting and feeling Grenache. And that really kind of talked to me about Erasmus. So that's always, is that what, the original vineyard or an original vineyard? The
very original vineyard.
Is Escales.
Yeah. And there are only 3 barrels in a good year.
Yeah.
In a plentiful vintage, there is only 3 barrels of it from that vineyard.
And is 2016 plentiful, or is it
normal plentiful? Normal plentiful. There were 3 barrels. Yeah.
3 barrels.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So then, tasting this now, I mean, you're happy with how this turned out.
Yeah.
How does it?
And I'm not often happy with my wines.
You are a very self-critical
but,
person. I mean, as far as your wine is concerned, I've noticed that over the years of having you taste the wine, and I mean, your wine tends to impress, floor most people who try it. I think you're always thinking of what could I tweak? What
Yeah,
could
exactly.
You know, how could I improve?
Yeah.
Which is probably why it's such an amazing wine. But how does it compare to the other 2016? It's now the only year ever that there'll be 2 Clos Erasmuses. How does this one compare taste-wise, feel-wise, texture-wise?
This one is, it has a very, very fine texture.
Yeah.
It's like a very fine silk. And so it is more that this wine has more of that character. The normal Erasmus is more classic. Erasmus has more ripe fruit to it. It is maybe not quite as focused. This one to me is very focused, and then the rest, the third, the last part that went in there, I was looking for that red fruit that jumps out of the glass and gives it a little bit of exuberance.
Yeah, a little immediate kind of.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
We always say appeals to. I always say, not we, I don't know, but appeals to your lizard brain. One of our other sommeliers, Jason, and I talk about it just immediately appeals to something primal, you know.
Yes,
that
I
ripe
guess so.
fruit or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So where did that portion come from?
So that was mostly from a different vineyard, Aubages, and which is a very interesting in the sense that, in my opinion, it was not planted in the right place, in a way.
Wow.
Yeah. And yet, the fruit that comes every year from that little, it's actually the bottom of a valley.
Right.
And the fruit is amazing. You have this dark and raspberry character, and it is a very pure fruit.
It's interesting.
Without being overripe, without being jammy, it really is an amazing fruit. So it's one of those things that happens in a Priorat. You think, oh, this looks beautiful and whatnot, and maybe it's not the best. Actually, the best grapes might not come from there, and then there is that little spot that seems so rugged and incorrect, and you take the vines, and it's amazing.
Wow.
Because the roots simply did find a vein of slate underneath, maybe 20 feet down, that is amazing, and just imparts that very, very distinct character.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Priorat is an amazing.
It is amazing.
Place, and it's with so many twists and turns and hills and valleys. I mean, I'm not surprised that there's some anomalies like that, or things you wouldn't think.
Yeah. Short of digging holes and deep holes.
That's how you have to. Plant. Well, this is a treat. I wanted to ask you, as you're sipping this wine and thinking of this wine, if you have any memories of Sam that stand out, in the world of food and wine.
Oh boy, so many.
I know, right? I know he loved your wine so much.
Well, his
enthusiasm
for food and wine in general. I mean, it's he was getting up every morning, I guess, looking forward to the new discoveries and to what life was going to bring that day.
Yeah, I agree. I think he really packed a tremendous amount in, and as far as imparting enthusiasm and imparting direction, he could sort of change sort of the direction of people's enthusiasm. If that makes sense, he could with his own enthusiasm. He's sort of like when a truck passes you on the highway and you're sort of caught up in its in its sort of slipstream for a little bit. You know, I think it was like that.
Definitely, yeah.
And he was always interested in new and exciting things, but I know he kept coming back to amazing things, you know, things that through the years stood the test of time.
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, yeah, that was Sam. He was very grounded, I would say, in every respect, and he knew, I hate to say the good things, but he knew a great person when he met one.
Yeah.
He had that instinct for the, you know, in food and aesthetics. He knew immediately.
Yeah, he knew it was important.
Exactly. He knew this was what mattered.
Right.
And that would last.
That's fun.
He was not fashion.
Right, I think he sort of transcended that. You know,
Absolutely.
He had a great idea for what was a classic and what would be a classic.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Daphne, thank you for giving me the opportunity to you know, step into your world.
No, thanks to you, because it was very important to me to have you make the blend with me, because you have been so close to Sam, and I would have been terrified to do that myself.
Wow.
So it was
it
was priceless to have you come and
Thank you.
do that.
Say cheers to you, and thanks so much.
Yes.